Hey everyone, this is Yulia Kosarenko. We're talking about business analysis best practices today. I've published so many videos and articles, and sometimes I get questions. For example, we're so busy on our current projects. How can we possibly find time for best practices? Or where do I get the time to do all these diagrams you mentioned if I'm so rushed to do other things? Or I'm always asked to write user stories. I have no time for anything else. So there is this theme in business analysis practice that I really want to address today, because the more we apply best practices, the better we get at our job and the better results we produce. It benefits the project. When you produce quality artifacts, when you do your analysis properly, it means you're able to better analyze business requirements, to address those gaps, to make sure that as little as possible gets missed, because of course things will get missed, but the more you address it through analysis, the better for the project. And we all know that errors cost much more when we find them later. If you find a missed requirement later after design was done, or after development was done, or even in production, of course, the cost is much higher than addressing it through analysis. So your best practices of business analysis that you apply when you do those BA activities do help to reduce the cost for the project, do help return on investment. But let me address this question. Where am I going to find the time? I feel so rushed. I feel so pressured. So going to speak from my own experience, because I worked as a business analyst for a really long time, systems analyst, business analyst, IT business analyst, and I'll share with you what I did and what I saw other good business analysts do. Okay? And what they did is they always thought about best practices while doing their job. So basically, they were doing things in parallel. The best practice application was the background of anything else they had to do. For example, if you are encountering unfamiliar terms at the beginning of the project, you start a glossary. You ask first, do you have a glossary? Do you have business terms and definitions documented somewhere? Do you have a data dictionary? If the company or the department or business group or your new client says, no, we've never had that, there's nothing hard about creating one. It literally can take you 10 minutes. Open Excel, for example, or any other spreadsheet software you use, create a few columns and start capturing business terms and definitions right there, right as you're talking. Instead of just making notes in your notebook, instead of making notes in the agenda and follow-ups, instead of just putting it in the document, put it as an entry in a glossary. If you're interested, by the way, I have a whole video about how I use Excel to start a glossary. Now, some artifacts need to grow up and need to eventually evolve into something bigger than just a spreadsheet. That's fine. Maybe eventually you're going to use a more professional tool for tracking your data dictionary. But starting somewhere is always a good practice, okay? And that actually leads your stakeholders to share more definitions with you, or perhaps to send you snippets of little lists of terms from different documents. And lo and behold, before you know it, you already have a starter glossary, and it didn't take you that much time. As an example, I would grab a basic set of terms from a training manual, such as a new employee training manual. There's always glossary there, because learning and development departments are really good about recognizing that the new terms and acronyms are important. And then as you go through your project, you just add to it, right? This is a good practice, keeping track of business glossary. Okay, so this is just one example to highlight the main idea. Best practices of business analysis should be in the background, should be the baseline to which you look to all the time, okay? It's about your mindset. You always have to think about how to do things well, how to do quality business analysis, okay? Your BA mindset is about making you responsible for understanding client needs, for understanding current state, for helping everyone else in their analysis, drawing the right information from them. And you need good business analysis practices for that. So whatever you do, you always do it with good practices in mind. Okay, let me give you another example of how you can apply best practices without necessarily making it a separate activity. Okay, you don't have to schedule it as like half a day in my week that I just spend on best practices. We know that is not often realistic unless you do have spare time between projects. For example, you are working on a new project and you're going to have to create a couple of business process diagrams, process flow. It could be UPN, could be swim lane diagram, whatever your company uses. Spend 30 minutes, literally you can do it in 30 minutes, create a clean and simple process flow template that you will then use for all of your diagrams, okay? Maybe it exists in your company, maybe not. In many companies I worked with, there was no template. So create one. For example, if you're using swim lane format, perhaps BPMN or simplified BPMN, create a template with 3-4 swim lanes. Determine what is going to be the main color theme of your template. Maybe your company has standard corporate colors. You can always use those. Apply those colors to lines, to boxes, create a standard box, create an arrow, choose the style of an arrow that you like, choose the font that again you're going to use in all of your diagrams. By the way, go with sans serif, please. With diagrams, don't use Times New Roman. Again, if your company has corporate branding and corporate fonts, definitely if they're suitable for diagrams, use those. So put a couple of boxes. They can be just placeholders like activity, sub-process, start, end, condition, and so on, but create those visual elements. The other thing you can do is create a standard legend. For example, some analysts like to use different colors for activities done in different systems, or manually versus automated. Pick colors, go with light colors, of course, something subtle. Create a standard legend, put it in a corner, and then use it in all of your diagrams. You may even add like a little templates for comments or callouts that you're going to use. Then any metadata that you need for capturing your process flow diagrams, for example, a standard header with process name, perhaps process owner, the date the diagram was last updated, and at the bottom, any reference that you need to do. It could be reference to systems, to data groups, to policies and procedures, to who approves the diagram, whatever is required. And that's it. And in 30 minutes, you're going to have a simple template, and then all of your diagrams are going to look consistent, okay? Of course, you can do it as you are creating your first diagram, and then make it look nice, and then make a copy, clean it up, and make that your template. That doesn't take long, but again, after that, all of your diagrams are going to look much more classy and much more professional. Continuing with that, you can use similar style in multiple types of diagrams, right? So the same fonts, the same shapes, the same colors could be used, whatever you create, context diagram, use case diagram, state transition, decision tree, anything you use. And then it does make things easier and to watch, to review. If you use consistent legends, it makes the review of diagrams faster. Your stakeholders understand them better, and any other customer that will be using those diagrams. So actually, it will save you time. It will make things easier. You just have to invest that little bit of time in advance, maybe 30 minutes. Another example of how you can apply best practices of business analysis as you go. Create process inventory. You're working on a project or maybe on a couple of projects. You're touching several business processes. Here's a question. Does your company have a process inventory? And process inventory is a really, really useful concept. When you have a list of your key business processes, it can be used for so many purposes. For example, plays huge role if you need to prepare an RFP, say for digital transformation. It can be the basis from which you can start data governance. For example, discussing which of our processes touch and create and update critical data elements, or which of our processes deal with private data, because that's important from privacy protection perspective. If your company does not have a process inventory, which again is more likely than that the company is mature enough to have it, you can start it. Again, simple spreadsheet for tracking process name, who is the owner, perhaps process group or capability it belongs to, how the process is triggered on demand, or perhaps it's cyclical and maybe it's done daily, weekly, monthly, and any other details. And then eventually you can even include a link to the process flow diagram once you create it. So even if you have 3, 5, or 7 process flow diagrams that you have to create for your 1 or 2 or 3 projects, already it's a beginning of an inventory. It's a starter. And then remember, every time you create things like that, you can share it with other analysts. If you're not the only BA in your company, maybe you have a huddle, maybe you meet periodically, share it with them, invite them to contribute, invite them to use it, offer them that. And if you start to contribute to the same artifact as multiple analysts from multiple projects, it will grow faster and it will be helpful for everyone. One more example could be a catalog of roles or actors. Imagine on every process flow, your swim lanes are labeled with the role. What role is responsible for these activities, right? So having those standardized is really helpful. And once you define those actors or roles or personas, whatever you call them, you can use the same labels, whether it's a swim lane diagram, whether it's a business use case diagram, whether it's a user story map, or even in the wording of your user story, whenever you say, as a customer, I want this, or as a customer service rep, I want that. You're going to use those same standard roles and everyone will have the same expectations of what they are. Okay, so again, it all leads to reuse, and reuse means saving on effort and being more consistent, saving on validation, and actually gaining in terms of your efficiency of business analysis process. So these examples are just highlights of various BA practices, and the purpose of this video is not to list every single practice, but to give you some ideas about how to apply, to encourage you to use them, and to give you some ideas about doing it without necessarily, devoting like 2 weeks to just setting up your business analysis practices. You can do it as a background. You can do it as part of your day-to-day activities. And the more you do it, the more disciplined you are, and you will start doing it automatically. You will start to apply the same styles everywhere or use the same styles. Maybe you have a little reference library for standard shapes and types of diagrams that you always copy and paste from so that your new diagrams all look consistent. Perhaps you'll start a little list of your own document templates for business analysis if your company didn't provide it, and eventually it will grow and it will be used by all of business analysts. I sometimes even have Excel templates, right? Because there are so many things we track in Excel, like matrices and lists. Standard header, standard subheader, styles, agendas, colors. It all helps. It all helps you to be more consistent. If you're using, for example, a spreadsheet to keep track of data elements, like you started to create a data dictionary, have a drop down for data types, like the standard one, use list of values. Have another drop down for main data groups, right? And every time you create that drop down, you're basically structuring your metadata, structuring how you store information. So remember this, every template, every standardized starter helps you to be more efficient. Yes, it may take initial investment, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, but it's going to save you so much time. It is shareable. It is reusable. As your business analysis team grows, everyone can use it. If you're actually managing a BA team or you lead, creating those helps everyone else. And you don't have to do it as a completely separate activity. In fact, if you're under pressure to give all of your time to projects, you don't have to report it as time separately spent on business analysis practices, because it is just part of you working on a project. You're just applying best practices to produce the best deliverable for that particular project. And once you produced it, you reuse it on other projects. Okay? So think about it when you're creating diagrams, typical user stories, even business acceptance scenarios, validation questions. I shared earlier, immersion or job shadowing questions, discovery questions, so many scenarios where they could be a good starter that you can then reuse and continue to use. So what will be helpful to you to make you successful in applying business analysis practices? So your mindset, which motivates you to try and use the best practice to produce the best quality work. System, which is, always thinking of, okay, I need to create a list. I should keep all of my templates in my folder. I'll name all of my templates in such a way that it's easy to find it. I will use the same styles for similar objects so that it's easy for me and for others to view and use my diagrams. So you need to have that system and you'll work it out. And discipline, okay? So mindset, system, and discipline are three things that we all need as human beings in a way to be successful, and that business analysts need to apply and use business analysis practices and to get excellent results. If you would like to learn more about BE best practices, join our BE Mindset Mentorship Circle. I'll share information in the comments and I'll talk to you in the next video. Take care.